Which Q50 should I get? Rear-wheel drive or all-wheel drive? I can't believe I haven't made this video yet. I've had a few people ask me this question just recently, and there's a lot of variables to take into consideration. And rather than type it all out to everybody, I thought, well, let's just make a video. There's pros and cons to both, right? But there's a couple of things just to keep in mind right off the rip. Number one, if you live in the northern climates, if you get winter, rear-wheel drive, probably not the best option for you. Even if you run winter tires during those colder months, it's still not ideal. Check out my video where I try to drive this Q50 in a snowstorm here in South Carolina this winter. You'll see what I mean. The all-wheel drive Qs, on the other hand, don't seem to have really many issues at all in the winter time in the snow, especially if you have winter tires. So I'm just sort of spitballing here, just kind of thinking about it, how I would process this information if I were trying to decide which one I would go with. So just stick with me here. So although the all-wheel drive version of the Q50 might do a little bit better in the snow than the rear-wheel drive, it's substantially heavier. I want to say a couple 100 pounds difference actually, which is pretty significant. But you also have to account for the fact that the all-wheel drive loses a little bit of horsepower through the drivetrain. So they're going to make, on average, quite a bit. I don't want to say quite a bit. A few more horsepower less than the rear-wheel drive variant. So the rear-wheel drive is going to be a couple 100 pounds lighter, possibly, and make a little bit more power on average. But you might argue that, well, you know, you might make a little bit more power with the rear-wheel drive, but the all-wheel drive is going to hook better off the line and get that jump start out ahead. So you're going to have to rely on the rear-wheel drive power advantage to try to reel that all-wheel drive Q50 back in a dig race. Well, the rear-wheel drive guys out there might say, yeah, well, with proper launch, driver mod, and a good set of tires, you're going to negate that difference in grip from a dig, where, a good set of tires is going to go a long way in helping that rear-wheel drive Q50 get off the line pretty solidly anyway. And then when you have the additional power and you have the weight advantage, the rear-wheel drive, who knows? This is really coming at it from the angle of the 3.7. If you're talking the 3.0T and you're talking tuning the car and having substantially more horsepower, the difference between the rear-wheel drive and the all-wheel drive in terms of power really doesn't make all that much difference. I mean, if you're talking 400 or 500 horsepower cars, rear-wheel drive is going to be a little bit more difficult to dial in terms of suspension and tires and getting that grip off the line. Or the all-wheel drive, if you got a solid, decent set of tires, you're going to hook and go, right? So, a difference in even 15, 20 horsepower isn't going to make all that much difference, because the Q50, the rear-wheel drive, is going to struggle to get off the line, especially unprepped or street racing type situations. The all-wheel drive is going to hook and go, so advantage there. Now, from a practicality and functionality standpoint, just for a typical Q50 owner, all-wheel drive is going to be slightly more maintenance. You have a transfer case to worry about, additional fluids, additional maintenance type stuff. There's more to consider when trying to lower the vehicle. Some Q50 owners with all-wheel drives have run into axle issues and axles popping out when lowered, more than an inch or an inch and a half or so. So if you want to lower your vehicle, take that into consideration. Also, your wheel and tire selection is going to change a little bit. It's not as easy to run a staggered setup. A lot of people like to run wider tires in the rear than in the front for fitment purposes, but also just kind of look and overall feel. You want a more concaved wheel in the back than in the front, for example. You can do it, but then trying to run the same tire up front as in the rear, it gets a little bit difficult because you want that overall diameter to be within 1%. I like to be closer to 0%, but within 1% in an all-wheel drive version, so you don't throw stuff crazy and cause, chassis warnings and all that stuff on your dash. But say you want a deep dish wheel in the rear, like a 10.5-inch wheel in the rear to fill out that wheel well a little bit, and you want to run like a 265 or 275 tire, well, you're not going to be able to run that same wheel, and you're not going to be able to run a 275 tire up front unless you got some crazy camber and really dial in your suspension to get those tires to tuck up in there. So you're forced to go with a smaller width tire, but then that can potentially throw your whole chassis system off, because you're going to have a much different overall diameter. So there's a lot of things to take into consideration when you're talking wheels and tires with an all-wheel drive car. You want to keep it within, again, that 1% in overall diameter. So for overall ease of use and just kind of, put the tires on that you want to put on and the wheels that you want to put on, the rear wheel drive is a lot easier to deal with than the all-wheel drive. From a maintenance standpoint and, less concern when lowering the vehicle with suspension setups and things like that, rear wheel drive also has the advantage. If this is your year-round daily driver and you live up north, all-wheel drive seems to be the one just to go to. If you're not too worried about slamming your car and you want to do a lot of racing, especially a lot of street racing or no prep racing, all-wheel drive, that seems to be the way to go. It's hard to compete with a car that can hook and book. Now, if you just want to get as light as humanly possible and you're going to be committed to finding the right tire and suspension combination and you're really going to focus on racing and you're going to get this car to the track, then rear-wheel drive might be the way to go. Not that you don't have to focus on these things with all-wheel drive cars. It's not like they're just, superhuman or superheroes and just, dynamite right out of the box and do whatever you want to them and they're going to run. That's not the case, but there is a little bit more flexibility, a little more wiggle room, a little more freedom in terms of tire choice and things like that, just because you have that advantage of the all-wheel drive. But for us rear-wheel drive guys, we have to be a little bit more deliberate in what we choose and the conditions that we're running into in order to compete with these all-wheel drive cars. Like I said at the beginning, there's so many variables, so many things to take into account: where you live, overall climate, wheel and tire selections, whether or not you like suspension or you're a stancy boy, or you drive on the track a lot, or you just are a street racer or no prep guy. If you're worried about maintenance, etc., you're worried about potential issues with axles and things like that, there's just a lot of things to take into consideration, a lot of things to think about when selecting a rear-wheel drive or an all-wheel drive Q50 or any car for that matter. So I hope I didn't make your decision even more difficult than it was before you watched this video, but I hope I helped nonetheless in terms of pointing out a few things that you might want to think about in going forward. So let me know in the comment section below if you have any additional questions or if I missed a couple of things. Again, I was just kind of spitballing here as things popped into my mind, so very well could have overlooked a few key points to take into consideration, but I think I hit a few of the main factors anyway. So thank you guys very much for watching. I appreciate the continued support. Again, hopefully this video helped you. Looking forward to more Q50 content to come and a lot more coming up for the 350Z. We're really jumping into that project now as well. So thank you guys again for watching. Appreciate it very, very much. We'll see you in the next one.